How's it going, Smart Start Radio? Hope you all are doing amazing today. I am your co-host, Empathy Eming Piansay.
And I am your co-host, Sara Robertson. Could not come. Eming is always coming in with the alliteration introductions, and she's too quick for me. I didn't expect it this time, and she did it again. Well, Empathy Eming.
That's our theme for today. In case
I love it.
I want to kick it off with that, so everyone knows exactly where our focus is today. So our focus on this episode is empathy, specifically in the meeting space, which personally, I feel often doesn't get discussed or brought into the light very often in terms of events. And I am very happy, very, very happy that we are doing this month, because I feel like as we approach the holiday season, which is coming up, so shockingly, it's already October. Who knew? The year could move this fast.
Start Christmas shopping.
Oh God, no. Money, save money. well, for me anyways, save money. But before we start things off, we just wanted to, our breaking news for this particular episode is the hurricane, and the name is escaping me right now. Sarah, do you know the name?
It's Hurricane Helene.
Hurricane Helene has hit Florida, correct? Or the East Coast?
Yeah. So Hurricane Helene hit Florida, the Big Bend region, which is not as common an area for hurricanes to hit. Usually hits the Panhandle region. So this Hurricane Helene, has been pretty devastating. Widespread flooding across Florida, moved up through Georgia, South Carolina, huge effects in North Carolina, as well as East Tennessee and Kentucky. So a lot of these regions and cities are facing extensive damage right now. As they continue to sort of rebuild, repair, deploy search and rescue missions over the next couple of weeks, we have yet to know really how long lasting the effects will be. So if you're a meeting planner and you're reading about this hurricane and you're wondering what to do, I think, going along with the theme of this episode in terms of empathy in the meeting space, I think just, have empathy for your partners out there, have empathy that they are dealing with a really, really unprecedented, a storm that caused unprecedented damage. We haven't seen this level of damage in decades, according to what plenty of news sites are publishing about the storm. So, you may see longer response times. You may have questions in the air right now. On our site, we have a lot of resources about contingency planning, about what to do. We have a story on this storm and the effects, and we'll continue to update it as news continues to come out. Stay in touch with your suppliers in those regions. Reach out, let them know that you're thinking of them, and have empathy for, slower than normal response times as they work to rebuild with their communities.
Yeah, traveling specifically requires a lot of empathy. I remember I was on a flight, or I think I was in Canada a little while back, and our plane was delayed. And you can slowly see the degrade in empathy for the staff who didn't have any answers for us. And it was interesting to see in real time that people had empathy to a point, and then when you feel like you're not getting heard or listened to is when that kind of starts to degrade a little bit. So we talked to a couple people. Sarah spoke to someone as well prior to this recording about kind of some concepts around empathy that you as our listeners may think are helpful. So Sarah, do you want to kind of explain what that was about?
So this is a story on loneliness specifically. So somewhat related to empathy in that, empathy in the meeting space and tackling loneliness and how it shows up in the meeting space are really, really similar. So this will be a feature story in the November. Oh, I said November.
That could be a month. November.
This will be a feature story in the November magazine. And this is a little preview to it. So I spoke to Lisa Belanger. She is a PhD and the CEO of ConsciousWorks. I saw her speak at CMP Advance for EAC last March, long time ago, in Toronto, and she was just phenomenal. So I reached out to her for this story. She has a lot to say about conscious connection. So in this interview, she offered some really, really solid tips about how to create real, authentic connection in your meetings. So let's dive right into it. So there's been a rising trend of loneliness. The US Surgeon General called it an epidemic when he released a report in 2022. So in general, just looking at this overall trend as part of like a broader societal trend, what are your thoughts?
I think it's really interesting. No, so loneliness is defined by the perception of how you feel. It's not actually how you are necessarily, but it's the perception of what your desire for social connection is to your social connection, the reality of it. And this means that you can absolutely be around people and feel loneliness. You can be alone and not feel loneliness. And we're all very different on what we desire and what we perceive as, and our sense of belonging, and all these incredibly important factors. But regardless of all of that, there, as you mentioned, there has been this significant increase. I do believe that a lot of what we're doing is looking for virtual and online sources of connection, which we know those in-person connections are more meaningful. In saying that, being able to use digital to enhance and to continue connections is fantastic. It's not technology bad, in-person good. It's not so simple. In addition to that, the connection through work. So where we've seen so much go towards virtual or hybrid work approach, one thing that has to be considered is the social connections people have from the majority of their day going to work, good, bad, and otherwise, and for those that live alone. So it's one thing if you are getting your constructing your social networks outside of your work hours. It's another one if that's not necessarily the case. So I think we're going to see this trend expand as we normalize that virtual workplace and or schooling. But we also have this ability to just be more mindful, more conscious about how we design it outside of that. Again, it's not one bad versus good. It's just we have to be more diligent, more than we've ever had to be before, of what does our community and connection look like outside of work.
That was really great, Sarah. Thank you for that. Moving right along, I promise this isn't like a downer episode. I know it's not.
It's not.
It's actually really interesting. But we spoke with two experts in empathy. We spoke with Naomi Crellin from Storycraft Lab, as well as Michael Tennant from Curiosity Lab, about the importance of empathy in meeting space. And they gave us some really awesome thoughts behind it. And we really hope you enjoy this episode, because I was over the moon to have these two on our show. And I know Sarah was just listening. If you watch our video version of this on YouTube, you can see her just like absorbing all the information.
Right.
Like, gimme.
If you could see, hard eyes appear on a real human face, that's what you will see, because these guys were phenomenal and brilliant, and I'm so excited for you guys to listen to them.
So let's throw us over to our conversation about empathy, coming at you now. Enjoy.
Welcome back, dear listeners, to Smart Start Radio, the Meeting Planner's Toolbox. I am your co-host, Sara Robertson.
And I'm Eming, Piansay.
Today we are joined by Michael Tennant, the founder and CEO of Curiosity Lab and author of The Power of Empathy, along with Naomi Clare Crellin, founder and CEO of Storycraft Lab, and may I mention a 2022 Smart Woman in Meetings Innovator Award winner. We love him. We see him.
Bravo.
Welcome, Naomi. Welcome, Michael.
We're excited to have you guys
and
here.
So excited to have you guys here. Today we are going to talk about empathy and how we can fit it into the world of meetings.
Yeah, I've been really excited about this talk because I've been trying to find a way to have a DEI conversation on the show, so I'm really excited that we're doing this. One really big thing that I think we at our magazine kind of try to figure out all the time is, the whole idea of a meeting is like you're gathering people, and you want them to feel experience and remember that experience and go home with like you learned something from said experience. So one question I really wanted to ask you guys is, how do you open the door for people to be more thoughtful and more caring about the space they're creating for people? And I know you both have experience with that. Sorry, whoever wants to start can start, but that's kind of where I wanted to start this conversation.
Naomi, you want to take it?
Oh, okay. All right. So how do we get people to be more empathetic and caring? I actually have to say that I think that there is a deeply held desire for people to feel a sense of belonging and empathetic and emotional connection with other humans. The oftentimes as we're putting meetings together, I personally haven't encountered people that are resistant to that. But that said, the busyness of life and the structures that we have in place and the way we've always done things and our methods of processes don't often just open up, as you said, the space for that work to be done. So I often say, as we think about empathizing with others, start with yourself first. Because there's a lot to be learned from sitting with your own goals and intentions and needs and desires and hopes and dreams and understanding where those are, so that you can then in turn open up to another person and ask them about how they feel about all of those things. Because once you start talking with that self-awareness around what's driving you and what matters to you with other humans about what's driving them and what matters to them, that way the magic can begin. That way you start to learn and listen. But I think that there's absolutely value in starting with yourself. It's like the oxygen mask.
Yeah.
Start with you,
Yeah,
and then you
I
can
love that.
extend that to others.
Definitely. That's interesting that you say that, because Michael, I noticed from looking at your book, you sort of take people along this journey of empathy. You have them start with themselves, and then the circle slowly widens.
So
Yeah.
in case Sarah's comment doesn't make sense, this is the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I own.
just even yeah, thank you for like just intuitively going there, because I was sort of thinking that as well. And Naomi, your point about, just opening up and starting with yourself, I think that most of us, when we go into meeting spaces, we maybe don't even realize it, but we're about to step into some level of vulnerability. We're going to be with people we know. We intend to engage with people we don't know. We're going to want to bring our best selves forward. We may be wrestling with whether that, how to deliver that in a way that feels authentic to you. But everyone has some element of that they're wrestling with. And I think if we all could acknowledge that we're coming in with some vulnerability, we're coming in with some fears, we're coming in with some unknown, it helps us to open up even more to the presence of our ego and the ways in which people we encounter, or even ourselves, we may, act or behave in a way that is slightly outside of what's authentic to us. So I think when I love, Sarah, that you talked about what phase one in my book, The Power of Empathy, phase one of the 5 phases of empathy, it really starts with learning to recognize and be with your most challenging emotions. Ideally, we're feeling joy most of the time. I'll speak for myself. When I'm feeling joy, I actually sometimes lose my train of thought. I end up presenting myself at times in a very authentic way, but maybe sometimes too elevated. And so just even joy, not just the challenging emotions of fear and sadness and shame or even anger if the safety in the space is disrupted. But the very first thing we teach meeting organizers, or we teach attendees, it kind of goes hand in hand, is what does it look like for us to all be willing to and vulnerable enough to recognize, be with, and actually bring our emotions into the interactions in the space. Is then certain that vulnerability, that willingness to model it, really opens up magic in connection.
Absolutely.
As Naomi, I feel, was alluding to as well.
Yeah. I think ego can really, well, I think like beneath ego is a lot of fear in how like we present ourselves. We are so worried of being judged that we'll present ourselves in certain ways that may be inauthentic to us. But Michael, I have a question for you that might be kind of complicated, but I have a feeling that you've got it. So when people are experiencing this ego, like this fear, what does joy do to help counteract that? Or does it do anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me as an event organizer, one of the first things that I do is find a meditative state. I'm a meditator. I like to journal. Even in the process of having an interview with the other event organizers and really attuning myself to receiving as much as possible can be a meditative practice within itself. But when you're able to almost sort of separate from your design, separate from your plan, and start to almost like imagine the diverse community that you're about to touch, it brings in so much inspiration. Now, obviously, an outcome that we all want, at least on the at the end, as people reflect on the event, is a feeling of joy, a feeling of warmth, something that they want to repeat, something they want to share. They want to tell narratives from it. They want to repeat elements that they've received. And I really love even just like embodying the moments that I've witnessed, creating that, the moments that I've felt that in events, and bringing that into the planning process. But also finding those moments that, you know, maybe started off as fear or started off as discomfort and managed to transform, and how that happened in the event space. Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Sarah. I'm curious, Naomi, what do you think about emotions and particularly joy in the event space?
You know, the word event seems to focus in on one particular moment, doesn't it? But actually, when we think about narratives and experience, these are journeys, and the event itself is just one moment on an overall experience journey, and all of the context and the up and down and the emotional roller coaster that comes with that. And you know, I think what I've seen is that there's a value to scaffolding as well throughout that entire experience. So to get somebody to a point of joy in one particular moment, you really have to be thinking about how you ease them to that place, right? That was one of the things that we heard about in the research on belonging that we've been doing, is that, you know, belonging's not a binary thing. It is this outcome of a series of connected, adjacent experience moments, right? And the role of joy, actually, for joy was one of the pathways to belonging that we found, is like, how do you find your joy? And the journey towards that begins by understanding what your joy is, right? And there is inherently in that journey towards joy those moments of discomfort, as Michael was talking about. You know, you may begin with a sense of, I'm not feeling joy right now. How can I go about finding that joy for myself, knowing the value of joy? to me as an outcome. So it's I think looking at just optionality as a way for people to explore and discover that joy, to be in a joyful state 100% of the time, it will be exhausting. I mean, people's batteries will just kind of frazzle.
Yeah.
But there's this arc, right? And there's a way that you kind of guide people through the process of understanding what their joy is, how equip them with what they need to navigate the less than joyful state with positivity, and I think that kind of self-awareness as well. My mum always used to refer to it as a stretch and grow space. That moment of stretching and growth is beyond your natural state at rest in supreme comfort, right? But you have to do that work to get to the ultimate reward. So when we think about experience design in the context of events and meetings, it's about giving people the tools to reach that joy themselves. I think we have to release ourselves as event organizers from the delivery of the joyful moment at every second of every day, and instead equip people with the tools to go out and find what their joy is, because it's going to also be different for everybody. Michael, you talked about this meditative state, right? The act of receiving and how joyful that can be, and how you get yourself into that space, which I can very much relate to. But I know there are a number of people in my life that would define joy very differently. So, I think providing those options and those navigational tools, once you have the self-awareness in place, is going to increase the likelihood of the joy being found,
I do want to take a step forward a little bit into, as people who kind of want to make people think about, themselves and other people in a broader scope. I am curious how you both, or why you both created what you created to do what you're doing, because personally, a lot of people don't think about that. They don't think about, the human factor, the emotional factor, those things like that. So what made you guys want to do that and essentially, build your lives off of that?
Okay, Michael, you want to take that one?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll take it. We'll mix it up. Well, I did not deliberately move into the facilitation or keynote speaking or event organizing space. I spent most of my career as a marketer, storyteller, business development professional, working in media companies, and then moving over into advertising. And when I decided to leave a 15-year advertising career, it was largely because I did not feel safe bringing my best self, bringing my worst self. Upon reflection, 4 or 5 years of creating the safety, I realized that my excellence at work was masking a lot that I did not even know I needed to pursue. And my normalization of actually socializing a lot and mixing in drinking and just kind of always being on this high level really masked a lot for me. So I would say sadly and luckily, life happened, and luckily I'd been learning tools in mindfulness, in personal development, in self-knowing, in men's work along the way, that when tragedy hit in my family, I was able to grab those tools just in the nick of time. And it also, the self-knowing that emerged from experiencing loss. I ended up losing 2 of my brothers in 2019. That was kind of this catalyst of breaking from this life as a marketer and into this journey. I like that word that Naomi used, because it's both a personal journey, but a journey that I've been able to bring outward and to turn into something that's teachable.
Mm-hmm.
But I started to just organically connect to wanting to um, feel safer, to want to make sure that I'm surrounding myself with people who are values aligned and who are thinking about me and my well being, and to get better at speaking up to myself and for myself when I don't see myself in an environment that is going to be nourishing, or is going to be um, just is going to feel joyful at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in many ways, I went on this journey of kind of being thrusted out of this illusion of safety in certain corporate settings into really having the spaciousness to unpacking why I felt that way, what I could learn to feel better, and then how I could pay it forward by helping to teach actually the tools that I use to equip others. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, in many ways, this is like a manifestation of dreaming, a manifestation of a process that ends at almost attracting values aligned people who want to amplify the work. So here I'm actually
Mm-hmm.
in an interview alongside my peers, alongside amplifiers who are speaking to thought leaders who can literally take the tools that we've developed and infuse them in their own ways into how they program design. So, um, yeah, I mean, I guess how I got here is almost a product of experience design within itself, which is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that, Michael.
Education.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a different story, but there are themes that resonate with what you talked about, Michael. For me, um, I began with this educational mindset. So I've been adjunct faculty for as long as
Mm-hmm.
anybody would have me, which has been a while now. And one of the things that I saw over and over and over again is designers would get stuck with ideas, right? There's this being an educator in the design field is quite a precious and delicate role. You know, you're helping people take an idea that's in their head that they have imagined and constructed and dreamed about. You're helping them to articulate it, to express it to others, to bring others into that story. And um, there's a lot of hopes and dreams and emotions that are associated with that process of expression. So, for a number of years, I was a thesis advisor for master's students in exhibition design, and I would see them approach their thesis topic. Often, these topics are chosen by the student because of their emotional connection to the content, right? It is deeply held and deeply meaningful to them, and oftentimes it's the result of thought that has happened over the course of several years. So they approach this big topic and they have big ideas. And there's always a point in the process where, you know, and just feeling stuck, you know, and the time and time again, the way to get those students unstuck was to reconnect them with the power of empathy, right? Was to get them to step away from their stuckness, to get them to step away from whatever they were holding on to, whatever facet that was hanging them up, and look at it through the eyes of another and try to relate it to the experience of another. And when I was able to help them do that, things started to move and they started to get into flow state. And then that joy came back, right? You know, the spark became joyful. So for me, I saw the value of empathy to the process of design and creation and manifestation. And what I found in my work at that point, kind of being agency side, was that I started to look around myself at agencies and I was talking to people about the value of empathy, and this is kind of pre-pandemic times, and very much received the message that that was not necessarily what they wanted to hear from a designer, right? Why are you asking these difficult questions, Naomi? And we don't have time in our very speedy process to think about the value of empathy. And at one point, I was asked to not include that in my rationale for design choices, and that is the point at which I left. Like, I think
Good call.
right?
Good call.
This is not
Solid move.
right for me, right?
Yeah.
But there was something what I had to do was find that belief in my values. I was like similar to Michael, I got to go out, find the people that understand this, find the people that are going to empower me to do what I believe in, and just go get it and then give it back, right? And so different sequence, different circumstance to you, Michael, but like it's similar themes, threads in that tapestry that woven together. There's this just belief in the value of the work of empathy. There's the personal benefit that comes from the practice of empathy, right? Being able to kind of work through things personally, using that, and then ultimately just seeing the benefit to others as well.
So through the work that you both do and the journeys that you've gone along on to develop the work that you do, today, how do you define empathy? Like, what does it actually specifically mean to you? And what understanding do you want the people listening to this podcast to understand empathy as?
Naomi, you want to take this one to start?
I would begin by saying empathy is letting go of what you think you know. Because empathy can be transformative, right? But to do that, you do have to go through this process, and it's probably in your 5 phases, Michael. It's kind of knowing yourself and then letting go, setting that aside. and then you can just be joyfully curious, right? Which is why I love the name of your company, Michael, because I think curiosity and empathy are inherently just there.
Yeah. There's something I wanna say that I'm grateful for that honoring, and at some point I want to talk about just how deeply connected I felt to your conviction toward empathy and toward empathy's role in the design process, so much so that you were willing to leave. It almost seems like that's a part of the journey too, is knowing yourself and knowing your role in the bigger picture with such deep conviction that you're willing to eventually step out of the systems that don't see that. But also I'd say the flip of that is that, and I know this is something you'll probably be able to speak heavily to, both in the empathy space, but also in the DEI space, is then almost like bringing that willingness to let go of what you know back into the room when you know you mean to affect people who are going to be resistant, are going to reject this, probably already hate it, like, and the narratives show they're going to hate me for doing this, and you still design to affect them positively, right? We're like that convicted, that like committed to it. But for me, empathy, the way that Curiosity Lab approaches it at this point is for those, it is for the naysayers in many ways. We've designed for the naysayers. It's a set of tools that helps you to understand yourself, understand others, and to understand your purpose to the people that you're interacting with, and to be willing to forget, or be willing to lower your ego, or be willing to be momentarily wrong if it means momentarily wrong if it means progressing the conversation, if it means showing people the vulnerability, the empathy of holding their truth as well as your truth. Sometimes, like, you have to show people what that looks like first, and then grit and bear it in a graceful way in order to invite them to do that. And that's just, the cross that we bear as empathetic leaders, but also I'd say as event organizers. What we're planning isn't always, most often isn't just for our particular taste, right? We may be selected because we're the right person for that moment, but we're going to be speaking to people who do not have our same taste. And so it's incumbent upon us to, on our growth, as Mummy used to say, to be willing to see our blind spots, which is, empathy as a tool helps us to do that.
I'm curious. So, in that respect, when you enter environments that people aren't necessarily going to like what you're going to say, has there been for either of you moments where that has happened and you were able to like basically change the room to your favor? Like, has it been a thing for you guys, if ever?
Well, I'll go first to say that, I've done a lot of work, and Naomi touched on this, on releasing attachment, that I'm going to move everyone. I feel like that is self-care 101 for a facilitator and event meeting organizer. What I will say is that I have had experiences where maybe going in, maybe not going in, but during my facilitation, all these narratives emerge around how poorly I've connected with the masses of the audience, or just someone who I managed to connect with visually, and I actually felt something like maybe I pushed them too far, or maybe we were, by my perception of what was going on from their face, what's going on in their heads, and then afterwards having a connection with with one of these individuals or many of these individuals, and learning that I was totally wrong, and they were moved, and they were in deep contemplation about something they didn't even know they needed or wanted to spend time with, and that was what was happening on their face. So I'd say most present for me is times where I've had this idea that this wasn't opening up the joy that I was hoping for, and then learning later on that I was off, and that I need to just trust in all the preparation, trust in the briefing, trust in the intentionality of what we put together, and then be willing to receive the positive and the negative for the future of this journey. Yeah.
I think some of that's beautiful. I think some of it comes down to, as a facilitator, as an educator in that room, letting kind of this constant inner dialogue around the extent to which you let go of a desire to control outcomes, and what is it that we're trying to control here? Is it outcomes? Is it moments? Is it ensuring that all voices are heard? And I think that is something I'm still learning. I think I'm always going to be learning, always be learning. I actually just came away from an experience recently where there was an individual kind of within a group of people that was a naysayer, and kind of aggressively so. But in not wanting to cut anybody's voice off, I probably gave him more space than I should have done. Because I came out of the conversation not wanting to challenge. He threw out, like, I disagree with you on X, Y, Z. And I just said, great, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to challenge anybody's agreement or disagreement. But what I found afterwards was that there was somebody who came to me and said that witnessing his aggression made them feel unsafe to add their opinion. And at that point, I felt really sad, because I felt like I had failed her by not being more concrete and shutting this individual down. What I had done was fallen into the trap of feeling personal about it, you know, and just kind of letting that go. So I think for me, it's just always about keeping the group, everybody in the room, front of mind, and their benefit, and it's sometimes difficult to do in like 60-minute sessions, whatever,
Totally.
you're doing a thing. But and more, over the course of a semester, say, where you're working with a group of individuals, it's easier to step in and out of that dynamic. But I think what that means is just those tools or those keywords. Maybe it's a mantra, maybe it's, you start off, Michael, with that kind of, what does it mean to be in a reflective state and receive, and coming up with something that allows you to just reset if you feel your vibration or your energy getting distracted away from that. It might be a hand movement, it might be a word, it might be a body movement that you can introduce into your routine that allows you to signal to yourself, nobody else needs to know, we're resetting here, let me look out to the group. And I think when you do feel challenged like that in those moments, opening up to even more dialogue, which can seem counterintuitive at the time, right? If you've received a negative comment, to then invite more commentary into the room. But actually what that helps to do is diffuse. What I found in that particular situation was that 99% of the attendees were on board and were in the conversation, and it was just one individual that actually ended up throwing the things off for the group. So turning it back out to the group and saying other opinions, that at that point the tide starts to shift and turn, and it's all through more dialogue. So still learning.
Right. Yeah, we're all still learning. I think that's one of the things that Eming and I come back to consistently with this podcast. It's like, hi, hello, we're fairly new to this industry and we are here to learn. That's why it's called Smart Start. But okay, I had two things that I wanted to say. The first is that a little while ago, the two of you touched on a point that I think is really important, and I just want to reiterate, is the role of empathy in the job of a meeting planner. Meeting planners, like the actual work that they're doing is innately empathetic, because you are creating experiences, scenarios for other people. You are putting yourself in their shoes as you design these environments for them and thinking about what is going to help create the impact for these people that I want to make. What do they need to see that impact? And then the second thing that I wanted to touch on is what steps planners can take maybe to make situations like the one that Naomi just described less, I guess, common. Like, what are steps that you can take ahead of time to help your attendees be aware that like empathy is going to be a very important pillar of this meeting or event?
Yeah. See, I'd love to jump in on that one. I get really excited.
Please.
It is almost my on-ramp into this world. Prior to all of that change and self-reflection, I was probably one of those naysayers, not a vocal one, but one that, especially in the subject of DEI, after 15 years in corporate America, and oftentimes the one time a year that DEI would come into focus, after 15 years, they kind of look the same. And after them looking the same, you get kind of cynical. So that was my flavor of it, right? There are different versions of it. It was just like, people who don't get the environment, people who are one-directional, people who aren't creating the safety for healthy, diverse discourse. And diverse discourse, I think, for me, that means differing opinions and likelihood of discomfort. Yeah. So, we ended up creating a game that gamifies teaching the ability to not assume that everyone is ready for every conversation, not assume that the container is ready for that kind of discourse, but to get them there. by starting light and leveling up. I actually have it here with me. It's called Actually Curious. And in this box here are 2 editions, one that's light and one that has 4 levels. And this is the workhorse for my meeting organizing. But the last thing I want to say about this is that the game itself asks individuals to listen without interrupting other people's sharing, and then to share from their perspective and not to engage in cross debating. And what that does is actually gamify ground rules that actually, facilitators, us as facilitators, when we have the space, in which we can always create the space, we can outline. And so if we know that we want to get into topics that are uncomfortable, it might be worthwhile to show people, model how to speak from or speak from their own experience, to give people other outs other than trying to debate, like taking notes, or like Naomi said, reflecting on how that is showing up on a more deeper and intentional level when you're, instead of doing what we're naturally kind of taught to do in our education system here in America and other parts of the West, which is to win. So if we're going to then tamp that down, they're actually like, we have to train that, or just like give it a rule. You can't do that, but you can do other things like make a note or learn from it internally.
I'm so glad you brought up your game, because I wanted to tell a story based on how effective that was. And okay. So I was in a room with Michael a year or 2 ago, and we were in a group with people who weren't getting along, and we were supposed to work together. And Michael just instinctively, wasn't prompted, brings out his cards, and we played a game. And the vibe shifted immediately. It was really fascinating, because I knew what happened before. And then all of a sudden, it was like we were laughing and we were happy. And I was like, everything he was working on was happening in real time. And it was really just amazing to see it in action. So it works. It works. Like, it's a thing. I'm sorry.
I'm still cringing because I'm still in disbelief that it worked. And that was definitely one of those times where I was like, okay, we practiced this enough, let's try it. And it just is so meaningful to hear it and still uncomfortable.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, but it's a really good story.
No, that's amazing. I mean, it's a great example. It does work. Like, Eming has experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
People, they just need a little help, I think, and that's part of the empathetic process. Is no judgment, but we need a tool here. Sometimes ego takes a bigger presence in the room, and we need some way to move around it. So congratulations, Michael. You did it. You found that thing.
And I love your willingness to share an example in which, in real time, at your experience level, with all of the forums that you've held. I mean, you're a natural educator and facilitator, and even still, there are moments where we get it wrong. But the willingness to, well, first of all, you shorten your learning ability when you're willing to not, abscond that moment, or like when you share it, you get to relive it, and then you get to almost practice, or even call in support through other examples.
Which, and I felt like I had learned more, and I actually had a great conversation with folks after that experience, and it's all cool. Everybody's good, but it is, these learning moments, they don't stop. They shouldn't ever stop, though, really. If we could, every group of individuals that we encounter is going to be different, and like I said, kind of having the tools. It's just about having some pieces in place that enable that empathetic process. And to go back to your 2 questions, the first one was, what does it mean to build empathy into our process, right?
Yeah. How do you prepare attendees to come into your event with empathy?
Right. And we often, like, as we're working with event teams, because it's not usually kind of one planner alone, Um, but it's a whole group of stakeholders, and a little bit like the example that you were just giving, Eming. Part of the empathetic work actually has to happen behind the scenes before you do the work with the attendees. So we talk about how we extend empathy not just to audience, but to stakeholders and clients, and getting everybody together on the same page. One of the first examples of that was in developing the experience profiles tool. Was working in a museum exhibition environment in which it's a national museum, and there were about a curatorial team of about 20 people were involved in outlining what this exhibit was going to be. And curators are amazing, intelligent, deeply passionate humans who tend to have a similar affinity for ideas and objects. Right. And at the Smithsonian, they have a model called IPOP, which is actually thinking about audience interpretation, and ideas and objects are the I and the O, but there's also people and physical environments that come into the mix as well. So the first thing that we did with this group of curators was sit them down and have them take a test to discover where their preferences sit. And then we also tested some of the audience, right? So it helped them connect with the audience, because what they found was, well, curators tended to have one set of preferences. When you start looking at a group of 12-year-olds or a family or, people from one zip code versus another zip code, there was different levels of interest in different facets, right? So giving them the tool to understand, number one, what their preferences were, and then number two, what the broader array of preferences could be, it actually allowed them to connect more deeply. So that was at this point about 8 years ago, but it's developed into the experience profiles as a tool that allows attendees to consider what their preference set is, also identify and connect with people that have different preference sets. They get to talk to one another about that. And actually what we've seen in a recent partnership with a group called INGO, you can take the experience profiles quiz and then it gets posted to LinkedIn. So people, you get your result that you're a harmonizer or you're a thinker.
Cool.
And you can post it automatically on LinkedIn. And what started happening was that people used this as an opportunity to say kind things to each other pre-event,
I love that.
Yeah, and it was just this vehicle for positive resonance that helped people get excited about the event, helped them turn up. The work of belonging had begun in their journey pre-event. Then they could turn up with a certain set of recommended icebreaker questions or conversation starters or places to meet different people. And it becomes a vehicle for the connection that we all deeply desire.
Right.
Like I'm feeling great connection with all of you. Michael, I feel like you're a spirit human.
Completely.
He's very magical, I agree.
Yes. It's got a unicorn vibe going on. Yes. But we all desire that in life, right? It's joyful when we find it and we reflect it to one another. So again, it's those tools that help people move through, whether it's animosity or awkwardness, and get down to the space of now we can be joyful and connect. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, as we kind of wrap up our conversation, the last question we ask all our guests is, because this podcast is to be like a box of tools and ideas for people to use for their future, for their career as a planner. So what
Hence
would
our
you guys
subtitle.
offer? I know.
Sorry.
Verbatim. I'm sorry.
Hence our subtitle. No. Oh, well, no, it wasn't verbatim. The Meeting Planners Toolbox. Please
enough.
go on.
Thanks, Sarah, for footnoting me. I appreciate it. So what is any tools you would offer, people who are trying to create events who aren't experts like you guys, obviously, because you guys are, the kings of your hills, respectively. So what would you offer people like me or people who are planners who aren't you, things that they could utilize in their future events?
Okay.
There you go. Well, I think Michael's tool. I'm going to sign up for Michael's card set right there.
They're so good.
Seriously,
They're so good.
I'm about to purchase a set right after
Go
this.
there.
Actuallycurious.com.
Yeah, there you go. Actuallycurious.com. I'm just going to amplify that for a second in a British accent because why?
So much better.
You're welcome. The Experience Profiles quiz is available to everybody on exprofiles.io. So that's out there and something you can utilize and learn a lot about. So if
I'm also going to be taking that quiz right after we finish this.
.io?
Yes, .io. exprofiles.io. So go there to take the quiz, and you can. It's also something that the quiz itself is freely available. So if you're wanting to kind of just have your team do it or have event attendees do it, you can do that too as a way to experiment with getting people connected. There's also another tool that I wanted to throw out there. I'm teaching again at NYU this fall, and we taught it for the first time last year. It was belonging-centered design. So the Wheel of Belonging, which is actually going to be at wob.storycraftlab.com, is a way for people to identify what belonging means to them. And then there's a whole onward journey from there about how you do that for your audience as a whole. But as a place to start, what does belonging mean to you? Go to wob.storycraftlab.com and explore the Wheel of Belonging.
I can't wait to use these tools myself and to amplify your work when I'm convening, as well as when recommending tools. As for me, I would love it if your listeners would pick up the power of empathy and use it to help stretch your own capacity for empathy, your own capacity for recognizing joy and amplifying it, but also for being with the more challenging emotions and using it in your event design. And when you are ready to continue practicing, of course, the Power of Empathy has 30 days of exercises that help you practice what you learn. So I'm sure you're going to find a handful of exercises that you want to reuse. But after that, pick up Actually Curious as well. And, just meet people where they're at. Not everyone is ready to go really deep into empathy. And we have a system of questions that allow you to start light, to even start at kids and go up to adults, or start light and move up into the necessary conversations that we need to have to advance movements in DEI and otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both so much for making time today. This was fun. I really love this.
This was amazing. I feel like I didn't have much to say because I just wanted to listen to the two of you talk.
You said so much. What are you talking about?
I just wanted to hear. I was just immersed in this. You guys are amazing.
Packed with empathetic leadership knowledge. Well selected. I'm so grateful I got to be on the show with you, Naomi.
Oh, back at you, Michael. Yeah, just a joy. Really appreciate you, Sara and Eming, for thinking of us as a group. Yay.
Thank you both so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Well, Sara, I had a pleasure hosting with you on this particular episode. It
is always a pleasure hosting with you on every episode, and also this one.
So for the future, if you guys are curious in following this particular show, you can find us on Spotify, Apple iTunes, on our website as well at smartmeetings.com, and or on YouTube, which is where we also have our video version of this this show. So please subscribe, listen, and if you have questions and you want to, or certain topics that you're interested in, please email us at editor@smartmeetings.com. So is there anything else you want to add to this lovely topic? Anything that you thought was interesting about our discussion that like stuck with you?
I think
not,
it's
fine.
just a matter of, as we operate with empathy in meetings and events, we create a space where everybody feels more welcome and more engaged. And if making people feel good and happy isn't quite enough, it also impacts your ROI. So there's plus sides everywhere. So let's move forward and operate with empathy everywhere in our meetings and events and in our lives. And just once again, thank you to Michael and Naomi for being brilliant people and taking the time out of their day to join us on this show. And thank you for taking the time to listen.
So what I'm hearing you say is empathy equals money.
It can, if that's what you want it to.
Can. I mean, ROI.
But that's not everything.
Yes, I know. But we are a corporate girly podcast, so we have
This is a corporate girly podcast.
If you know, you know.
Yeah.
If you got this far, you know what this is. Anyways, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to our next episode dropping in November, which I don't know if we want to give them a little teaser if you want.
Well,
no, it's fine.
If you like to party and you want to redefine what it means to party, we have a very special guest star. You might know this person. You're going to have to wait to find out, though.
So stay tuned for November, first week of the month of November. Our next episode will be dropping. But until then, and we hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you guys soon. Bye.